Hey guys, welcome to the Health or High Water podcast. I'm your host, Trip Parks, with here Dr. Thomas Mayer. I'm super excited to have him on. Um, Dr. Thomas is the head doctor for the NFL PA Players Associate NFL Players Association. He's also the professor of emergency medicine at George Washington University and senior lecturing fellow at Duke University, as well executive vice president for leading for Longetics Health, which makes intelligence matter. Tom, thank you so much for coming on here and just taking the time to speak to our audience. A lot of our audience members are in long-term care health. They're suffering pretty bad Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's. Thank you so much for coming on. I mean, I'm the most excited about the NFL part, but I know the audience is more excited about the longevity stuff. So I'm just excited to dive in. I see you went to Duke. You went to University of Utah for your residency. How did you get into all this?
Well, I was, first of all, it's an honor to be on. I love the work that you're doing. The health or high water is a really nice double entendre, I think. And I'm a huge Taylor Sheridan fan. And as you know, he wrote Hell or High Water, that incredible movie, as well as everything else on TV and podcast, or not podcast, but streaming platforms these days. It's an honor to be on. I was a linebacker when I was in college. Job description blow things up. About a third of the way through the season, the coach called me in his office, and I was puzzled because I'd had a great. I started as a freshman, which is very
Whoa.
unusual in those days. And I was puzzled because I'd gone 14 and 3, 14 tackles, 3 assists, 2 interceptions. I thought, what's my butt getting called on the carpet for?
Right.
He said, Tom, you got to choose a major. And I said, a major what? You didn't say anything about a major when you recruited me. He said, no, a major field of study. So I chose theology. So linebacker, job description, blow things up. Theology, job description, synthesize, pull together, keep things, meaningful in the midst of chaos, cacophony, and confusion. And that's probably some kind of satanic combination right there, linebacker and theology. I didn't college. I mean, the whole pre-med that never occurred to me until two of my professors pulled me aside, and I was a junior, and they said, "Has it ever occurred to you you might have more impact if you became a physician instead of a theology professor?" And I said, "Well, I'm not going to be a theology professor. I'm going to be an NFL linebacker." And there's a story about that. The Bears and the Vikings both had a chance to weigh in on that one and declined. They told me aside from size, speed, strength, and what was that other thing? Talent. Talent. They said I had no talent.
My gosh.
So at any rate, I came to medical school in a strange way. I mean, a doctor was somebody who sewed up my forehead or chin when I got a laceration, or worse, stuck his finger someplace I didn't want it to be, and said, "Turn your head and cough." It's like, who wants to do that? But it's all worked out great. I've really enjoyed it. I think I'm pretty widely known as the only mistake the Duke Medical School Admissions Committee ever made, and they've been ruining that decision ever since. But it's been a blast.
Well, that's got to have a unique perspective though, because I mean, you were at a time or playing at a time where there wasn't a lot of recovery for the bodies. There wasn't a lot of weightlifting. I mean, there was not a lot of any of that going on. So having that perspective of, getting into the medical field of, what people really do to their bodies to the extreme, did you get kind of into the longevity section of it first, or how did that work?
Well, it was a combination of things. I get people ask me all the time, "Hey Doc, how do I build my resume to get a job like yours as the medical director of the NFL Players Association?" And my answer is, I became the medical director on August 1st, 2001. Corey Stringer, the tackle for the Vikings, died of heat stroke. And Gene Upshaw, best left guard in the history of the game, Hall of Famer, um, called me up and said, "Doc, you got to step up to the plate and become our medical director." And Gene didn't ask these things. He told these things. He said, "You are going to step up and be our medical director." And so my point is, resume had nothing to do with it. Gene was my best friend. He was my best friend because we shared Our sons were best friends, and we coached t-ball together and football together, and countless barbecues and bottles of Silver Oak Cabernet. He loved Silver Oak Cabernet. My point is, he didn't call a search firm. He didn't look at Chat GPT because it didn't exist at that time.
Right.
He called me because he trusted me. And so my point is, when I tell my audiences, I do a lot of public speaking, as you know, I always tell them, don't build resumes, build relationships. Build relationships, and everything else will take care of itself. That's certainly been my experience.
Well, and that's super true. I'm like building my business. I had no money, so I grassroots it, go door to door. Walk into senior living communities. Hey, listen, I'd love to offer you guys a free trial class just to show you guys about. And it's a constant prove yourself, right? With those kind of things, but you're building relationships, and those mean more than anything on a piece of paper.
Yeah,
So
there's no question about that. And to your point about longevity, I started out, and for a long, I mean, I've been doing it 25 years. I started out, we're a union, Players Association, but we're a union. We had roughly 2,500 dues paying members. But increasingly over time, I mean, I calculated up. If you think about it, there's 300 people coming into the league every year, means there's 300 people going out of the league every year. So I've taken care of over 10,000 former players while they were players. Now, increasingly, our executive directors have asked me. Our current one is J.C. Treader, as you probably know, great guy,
yeah,
phenomenal guy. Have asked me to also take responsibility for our former players, and you begin to look at it. I always tell my players, there's a difference between lifespan, how long you live, date of birth to death, health span, how relatively healthy you stay during the course of your lifespan. But what's missing, I think, and we're working on this and writing a paper and a book, is joy span. The joy that you have in life, and how well you live during the course of both your lifespan and your health span. And as you might guess, there's a feedback loop, I think, that the more joy span you have, the more health span, and in all likelihood, lifespan as well. So it's an important way to begin to look at how do we take care of ourselves, not just from a training, a weightlifting standpoint, but how do we take care of ourselves mentally, physically, spiritually, and joyfully.
and that's man, you're just like speaking not to my brain but my heart too. And the reason being is, so when my mom had, and for the audience that doesn't know, my mom had multiple strokes 4 years ago, and it's why I got into preventive care. But the healthcare system is super fragmented, right? You got doctors over here, radiologist over here, neurosurgeon, and not a lot of them are talking and working on like a profile, an individual profile, and everyone's got individual needs and different kind of things, right? Like our bodies fall apart differently. We develop cancer at different rates, genetically and epigenetically, are environmental factors. And I try to come up with a process called health profiling. I'm going to take genetics, DNA, blood work, movement screening, family medical history, and come up with individualized programs. So, and with that being said, is I'm seeing a lot of people that have high risk of ACL tears, have high risk of fear and anxiety, depression, those kind of things. Are you seeing like not just during, but like after taking care of these players that they have similar issues as just everyday people of wear and tear in the body, not taking care of themselves right?
100%. When our boys were younger, Maureen, my beautiful and brilliant wife, and I had three boys, now young men. But when they were younger, I used to take them to school every day I was in town. I've always had to travel a lot, so I couldn't take them every day. But when I was in town, I always took them to school. And I always said, as they got out of the truck in the morning, precisely the same thing, verbatim. One more step in the journey of discovering where your deep joy intersects the world's deep needs. And I swear I said this to them. They preferred to take the bus, as you might guess. They don't want to hear that. But you have to start with your deep joy, not the world's deep needs. You're going to become a doctor. You better become a doctor because it's your deep joy, with all the positives and all the negatives and all that goes with that, not because mommy and daddy thought it would be a good idea. The world's deep needs are infinite. What's my point? Our guys, every single one of them, started with the deep joy of wanting to play professional football, as I did. that talent thing got in my way, but not in theirs. And they go, the average length of a career in the NFL is still 3.5 years. It was when I started, and it is now. It hasn't changed. And that's with, the Tom Brady's, the Drew Brees, the Patrick Mahomes, and Matthew Slater. Now, you may not know the name Matthew Slater, but greatest special teams player in the history of the game.
Oh, I
Uh,
remember.
yeah, he's an incredible guy. And those guys play 20 years, 15 years, 14 years. And if that's the case, you're going to have a lot of onesies and twosies, meaning one
Right.
year, all that. Now what happens, their deep joy has suddenly been interrupted. And they're going to have to figure out what's my next deep joy. And how am I going to take my talents mentally, physically, spiritually, psychologically, and funnel it towards whatever that next deep joy is going to be? So it's an honor to help them with that and help move them in the direction. I think the work that you're doing absolutely critical. I mean, as you know, we used to say you can't change your genetics. Well, now you can. Kids are born with sickle cell disease, and through a combination of CRISPR technology, uh, able to splice in the genes that you need. But the bigger opportunity is still epigenetics. It is how do we take, and your audience is used to this, but the epi part, meaning what's in the cell that is not genetic, but influences it, whether it's mitochondria and all those pieces. The whole idea of autophagy and how do we take care of ourselves from a macro standpoint down to a cellular standpoint. It's really fascinating stuff, and what an honor to live in an era when we can do this.
It's absolutely like it blows my mind. And like when I get really excited talking about it and someone else does it, I'm like, what you don't understanding like how amazing this is that we could like program and profile for people for their whole it's like a human GPS system for us about, hey, listen, you got 100% increased risk for lung cancer. You have to stay away from cigarettes, even secondhand smoke. Like and that's kind of the point is like, do you see like not just like individual problems with people, but like fishnet approach problems like hey like listen like we did one workout program for the whole all these players and not everyone's seeing the same results or we tried this one diet what I mean is are you guys looking individualistically per after they retire like hey listen this person's got a shoulder injury they need to be set up with a certain prehab what does the longevity look like for a professional player after playing versus a normal person.
Well, two of my most important influences at Duke, Dr. Ralph Snyderman and Dr. Sandy Williams, came up with a concept you're very familiar with, which is prospective medicine, personalized medicine. That what works for one person will not work for another, and that each of us have to have a personalized approach. And now, the interesting thing is that Ralph was a rheumatologist, Sandy was a cardiologist. You say, well, what's the common ground? The common ground is their research was on cellular receptors. And why do some people react to a medication and others don't? You could take Lipitor and get a great result, no side effects. It might not be a lipid lowering medication for me. I got to be on rosuvastatin, Crestor. Fascinating stuff. So it has to be made personalized. My guys, they're bigger than they've ever been. They're faster than they've ever been. But if you sit and talk to one of my players, particularly our bigs, the guys with their hands in the dirt, to use all the different John Madden analogies, the big uglies and all that stuff. Although I don't use that latter term with them, trust me. But if you say to them, what, you're 6'7" and you weigh 360, and you step down from football either because you retired or you were retired. There's a difference between that neuropsychologically, number one. But number two, how many times did a team physician ever take you aside and say, you know what, 6'7", 360 works great for a defensive tackle or offensive tackle, but it doesn't work at all as a human being. Your BMI has got to change. The answer is zero. Those conversations aren't occurring. And so we have to have those conversations. We have to be able to say, okay, now it's time that even pushing the weight, as you know, there's a phenomenon known as athlete's heart. seen in resistance training athletes,
Yes.
and they have a clear diastolic filling problem. Now, the good news is you can detrain them and turn them into, instead of resistance athletes pushing a lot of steel around, to endurance athletes. And as their body changes, you follow them from an echocardiology standpoint, and it goes away. It's incredible, and yet if they don't know that, then they're going to keep doing what they were always doing, which is pushing a lot of metal around and eating the same way they've eaten and all those things. So it's a good time to be somebody who's trying to help patients.
100%. It's such a cool time in medicine, and a lot of people are coming together trying to figure these things out because we got a downstream problem. Not only the VA's full of people, the hospitals are full of people. And the only way we're going to solve that downstream problem is come up with an upstream solution of figuring things out individualistically and having healthcare professionals come together for one profile. But hey, listen, the personal trainer's working with them 3 times a week. This is their notes. This is their cardiologist, and talking about everyone needs to come together to figure out problems for the long term instead of just going to the doctor after something bad happens.
Yeah, and your point that people aren't talking to each other is absolutely true. And not to criticize my fellow physicians, it's really a systematic problem. The system itself, the processes themselves, have not encouraged communication across boundaries. First of all, it shouldn't be boundaries. It's your body. It's your patient's body. It's their mental, physical, spiritual environment and milieu. But we have to move past that. You need every patient, I think, needs a navigator. My wife calls it a navigator, somebody who's there to kind of work across and through these boundaries and ask questions and take notes and all that goes with it. And I'm sure your mom needed that as well. But the ability to, primary care physicians reaching out and having communications, maybe AI will help us with this. I hope that does.
I do too. I mean, I don't think people are leveraging it properly, like with putting data in. Like we have AI, but they don't utilize it. Like I utilize it building my program so much. There's so much data that I'm building with these programs that I can't do it by hand. And
Yeah, one of the chapters in the last book I did is, data, knowledge, and wisdom. They're not the same thing. I'm fortunate in my position to know most of the real cutting edge AI folks in healthcare. And I ask them this question, data, knowledge, and wisdom. Can AI get us to wisdom? And without exception, they say absolutely not. It's having a very difficult time getting us to knowledge. It's a lot of data. And well, I don't need to choke on data. I'm already choking on data. The question is, a simple story. Our middle son, Kevin, uh, ended up playing lacrosse at Duke, and after that went to the Marines. But when he was younger, I came home from work one day, and he was doing his homework. I could see he was very frustrated, and I said, "Kevin, do you need help?" And he goes, "Yes, it's my English homework." And so he gave me this passage. I read the passage, and I said, "Kevin, this is what it says." And he throws his pen down. He's very frustrated. He said, "Dad, I know what it says. What does it mean?" And I think that's what we're choking on, is what does it mean? Now, that doesn't mean AI is bad. It just means we've got to help it get where it needs to be able to do, to have the wisdom to help our patients, both population based but also individual based, the personalized precision health.
I couldn't agree more. And again, it's up. It's not about having a whole bunch of tools. It's about utilizing the tools we have properly.
Yeah,
And that's
I
and again,
totally agree.
that's the thing. I think everyone feels like they have a solution to this when really the solution is us coming together, removing the boundaries like you talk about, and coming up with a plan long term for people. And I've been even thinking about like military, outside of the military, same kind of thing, as they've lost their joy, their purpose. A lot of them are in there because they love the military, and then they're at this whole second half of their lives, and they're spending it at the VA because their knees are shot, their back is shot, and there's no real long term plan for them. And this it's
No,
just not.
I agree. I mean, there's three things I think that are critical. One, every member of a team is a leader. Lead yourself, lead your team. Number two, Every member of a team, any team, not just sports teams, not just military teams, not just tactical EMS teams, but any team in life, including a family, is a performance athlete. No different than my 2,500 NFL players involved in a cycle of performance, rest, and recovery. Performance, rest, and recovery. And as you know, Trip, we have neglected rest and recovery. So invest in yourself, invest in your team. And then number three, the work begins within. The work begins within because we have to recognize that the way we're working isn't working and take responsibility for understanding that self care is critical care. And I'll say that again, self care is critical care. As an emergency physician, I learned early that gestalt, that sense of, I know what the numbers say. This lady's, something's wrong with her. And being able to call docs and say, you need to admit them to the hospital or you need to do a catheterization on them or whatever it is, there's still a significant room for gestalt, in my view.
Well, there's room for improvement everywhere. That's where we're at. But having conversations just like this is how I feel like we make those steps, right,
Yeah.
to fix them. And what I like you said about the recovery part, I've been reading. It's been the most boring book of my entire life, but it's interesting. It talk about sleep. Um, do you see? Being in the NFL is super high stress. I'm sure that there's a lot of pressure on these people. Do you see players have sleep issues? Because the people I work with all the time have sleep issues. It's not talked
Oh,
about.
100%. I mean, first of all, if you look not just in athletes, but look across the board and say regarding longevity, the two biggest single predictors of all cause mortality in every decade of life. One is, if not obvious, should be VO2 max. So, exercise, get off your butt and get moving. How do I start? Today, one step after another. And you say, well, I can't run to a mile. Don't run a mile, just walk, just start somewhere. The other is sleep. And yet, but, particularly in my field, we used to brag about, I don't need sleep. I'll sleep when I'm dead. I only need 2 hours of sleep. But you can't function. I'm supposed to save lives as an emergency physician on 2 hours of sleep a night? I don't think so. I don't think so. My guys, a lot of them have sleep apnea and they know it or they suspect it, but now they got to deal with it now that they're out with all kinds of different ways because it's going to be hard to have the lifespan, health span, and joy span if you're not able to rest adequately 7 to 9 hours of sleep minimum every night. Now, are there going to be some nights that doesn't happen? Sure. But all the more reason to get the 9 instead of the 7 to make up for the 5s and the 6s.
I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the big contributing factors to my mom's stroke and everything was stress management, and sleep was part of that, right? She did not sleep well. She smoked. She didn't eat right. I mean, all the indicators were there, but the stress management was the number one, in my opinion, that caused all this is, not working out, sleeping like absolute garbage all the time. And the thing is, with that being said, is you can't recover, you can't build muscle without that recovery process. And everyone talks about your quality of life is dictated by your ability to get up and down off the floor as you age, and you can't do that without muscle.
Exactly. No, absolutely. As you know, the GLP-1s are miracle drugs.
Yeah.
But at the same time, about 42 to 48% of what you lose is going to be muscle mass. So, protein intake critical, absolutely critical, as is resistance training of one type or another.
100%. And it's about these little tiny compounding interests, right? I'm going to drink more water. I'm going to go to the gym a little bit today. I'm going to take my magnesium supplement, whatever my blood work says I need. It's about these little things, and I think that everyone listening that thinks they need to be some kind of NFL athlete to be healthy is it's not true. You just got to take a few healthy steps of getting some more rest, making a bedtime ritual, you know, choosing a water instead of a Coke.
No, 100%. I had a conversation this morning with a former player, and we are talking about sleep, and he said, what's your best advice on sleep? And I said, CNC. It's got to be cool. Your bedroom should be in 68, 69 degrees at absolute maximum. And the other is calm, meaning, keep these weapons of mass distraction, our cell phones and iPads and everything else, out of the bedroom, and don't engage in them. For best is don't do it for 2 hours before you go into the bedroom. Now, that's not always easy. It's not always easy for me, but those are the two things that are simple things. Doesn't take a gym membership. I always tell people, how do I get started? The answer is, go out and buy a dumbbell and do 100 sumo squats every day. And that didn't take a gym membership. You don't have to go anywhere. You know, put it in your house and just make sure you start that way. Now you can add all kinds of other things on that, but that core, it builds core strength, as you know, builds leg strength and all that. And particularly if they're on a GLP-1 or anything that's going to be creating sarcopenia.
That is the biggest problem I see is that muscle loss, right? So for the audience, how
Sarcopenia.
start, I can never pronounce that right.
I know.
Is muscle loss as we age, and in my opinion, when we talk about things like an 83% mortality rate after 65 years old when we fall, that dictates right with muscle loss. If we had more muscle, you probably wouldn't fall as much. So it's a huge issue in seniors of just seeing muscle wasting, atrophy all throughout the board, and doing things, especially like I love what you said about the squats, is because that's a natural motion. People have to sit down and stand all the time, and you should be doing it right anyway. So why don't just practice how to do it right?
No, exactly, exactly, and so the same with push-ups. I can't do a push-up. Sure, you can. Do it from your knees. Start from your knees. Focus on form. Don't worry about volume. Focus on form so that you do it right, and you'll build over time. And that didn't take a gym. I got nothing against gyms.
Yeah.
I love it. It's just that you gotta go, and you gotta get in the car. Even if you take public transportation, it's a willful action instead of saying, I'm just going to walk in the next room, bang out 100 sumo squats, 3 sets of 33, and one to grow on, as the saying goes, or 2 of 50 or whatever, and gradually increase the weight. I mean, there's 1,000 ways to make this work, but it starts with the will to do it.
Well, it doesn't matter if you're an NFL athlete or not. You got to take care of yourself, guys, and that's for the audience, and that's something that Tom and I agree on 100% is making sure you take care of yourself, because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others, and that's kind of our purpose here on Earth is to make sure we're taking care of people. I know we're getting kind of towards the end of the podcast here. I really want to ask, what do you want to do with all this experience that you have? What kind of goals is your 5 years down the road with all this information?
Well, it's a great question, and I'm often asked it that way or this way, and that is, hey doc, you were talking about deep joy. What's your deep joy? My deep joy is helping other people find and fully express their deep joy, and thank God I'm in, both as a physician, in a position, and I'm not Mr. Big Shot or anything like that, but there are certain people that will listen to me or have me on their podcast, as you have, because I'm the medical director of the NFL Players Association. It's not my first rodeo. I've been doing it for a while, and it's just an honor. When my phone rings and I don't know who it is, I always answer the same way. This is Dr. Mayer. The answer is yes. Now let's figure out what the correct question is. So, I love it when my phone rings and people say, hey, doc, can you help me? The answer is yes.
Well, you've got a certain smile to yourself that a lot of people don't find their passion and their purpose in life, and you seem like you definitely have, and you're helping the community out, which is why we're here on Earth, is to help our fellow humans out as much as we can, and they help us out where we mess up or can't fill that hole. And I think that's really important. Thank you for all that you do for not only players, but for the longevity sake of what's going on. This has been a dream podcast for me, is having someone like you come on that's, again, you're the NFL guy, but you're a doctor first. And you're taking care of people and trying to solve problems that a lot of us have. So I just want to, huge thank you to you for coming on this podcast and sharing your time with us.
It's my honor. Let's do it again sometime, and we'll solve all the rest of the world's problems.
So on the next podcast, guys, we're going to solve all the world's problems. So you can make sure. Um, Dr. Thom Mayer, thank you so much for coming on this podcast and sharing. Make sure you guys go check out everything this guy's doing between books, speaking. This guy's absolutely amazing. I talked to him for a pre-interview before this and just lit up with joy because he's just a light in this world, man. So thank you so much for coming on. Check out everything that he's got going on. Follow his story and his journey because it's worth it, man. Thank you guys so much for watching the Health or High Water podcast or listening. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, and sharing with everybody. It means a lot to us. Thank you. Peace.